Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this episode, we're going to be talking about 5 of the best baits that you need to be throwing in the month of July. You know, July is really, characterized by extreme heat, hardly any wind, and a overall tougher bite than we saw in previous months. You know, May and June, the bite's pretty good, especially offshore. So things really start slowing down in the month of July. But before we get started with the meat of this video, just want to remind everybody, if you enjoy this type of content, consider hitting that subscribe button and liking and sharing this content too. That is like the best way that you can support this channel. And I love doing these videos. I do about a video a day sharing all the things that I've learned over the years bass fishing, and so hitting that subscribe button is like the best way that you can support this channel. So thank you guys in advance. But let's get back to July. I'm drifting into the woods here. Probably all kinds of spiders and unsavory bugs. But month of July, like I was saying, is a little bit tougher. Okay, this is a time period that is not necessarily the hottest bite of the year, no pun intended. It is the hottest of the year, but not terribly awesome fishing. Okay, and there's a lot of different things that are happening that that make that a reality. The first thing that's happening is, number one, people have been out fishing for bass more so than any other time of the year. You know, April, May, and June, most people are out. The weather is awesome. The fishing is awesome. Especially in late May and June, the offshore bite is spectacular. The fish get out offshore. They really are biting. You can use reaction techniques, power fishing. It's awesome. But then, as soon as those fish start getting pressured too much, going into July, they start to kind of break up. Those big schools that you see on a lot of lakes, they start breaking up into smaller little wolf packs and things like that, and a lot of fish start leaving the deeper areas anyways. And the reason for that has a lot to do with dissolved oxygen content. May and June, a lot of fish are offshore because you still have a lot of rainstorms that are requiring, whoever's managing these lakes to pull more current. And so the dissolved oxygen content is pretty consistent throughout the depths. Okay, but as soon as you get into July, you're talking about 90-degree water temps. And there's just not as much rain, so you don't get as much of a flush throughout the system. And the deeper areas of a lake, especially on this lake that I'm fishing right now, there's really no water circulating through it, and it's also protected from the wind if there is any in July. And so the deeper areas aren't even habitable for these fish. And so a lot of fish like to focus shallow, and the fish that are deeper are just harder to catch overall. So I'm going to pull myself back into the shade here. Those are a lot of the reasons why the bite starts to slow, and you also start to see more fish out or up shallow. A lot of the fish start moving into shallow areas if they have the shade, to kind of protect them, find cooler water, and also to ambush prey. So a lot of the baits that you're going to see me talk about today are either super finessey or allow me to catch those fish that have moved shallow. Okay. All right. So the first technique we need to talk about is a drop shot. Okay, this is as finessey as it gets. A drop shot is really a key part of my July arsenal, especially if I'm on the Tennessee River and I'm still fishing, deep for fish. This is a time period where there's not as much current as we talked about before, and the fish just, they start getting really, really picky and tough to catch. And a drop shot is like my best, most consistent producer. Now, most of the time, if I'm down south fishing for largemouth primarily or spots, I'm going to be using some sort of a long tail or a straight tail long worm, something in the 4.5 to 7 inch range, okay? And usually the colors that I'm gonna be choosing have a lot of purple or pink in it. Morning Dawn is a classic color. That's probably the #1 color that you wanna throw this time of year. This color right here is Meat Dog. It's got a little bit of purple in it. And a little bit of kind of like, it's almost like a grayish green back to it. But this is another really good color. Margarita Mutilator is another one. But usually those purple worms and those like Morning Dawn colors, those are my favorites. But I do like these longer worms for drop shotting down south. But when I go up north for smallmouth, that's a totally different game. Usually I'm using something like a Trick Shots that imitates gobies up there. But overall, whether I'm fishing south or up north, a drop shot is like a must-have during the month of July. All right, so the next technique is also a finesse technique. Sorry, I'm like dripping sweat right now. Wild how hot it is. But the next technique is another finesse tactic, and that is a shaky head. Shaky head is a great way to catch fish in July, especially if I'm on a lake that has a lot of slow tapering structure. You know, long points, maybe it's a shoal or a hump or a saddle or something like that. This is a really good bait to just slow down and just drag on the bottom, okay? This is a bait that I catch a lot of fish with, and you know, if I had to pick one bait to throw all over the place in the month of July, it probably would be a shaky head. Just a straight tail worm on a shaky head. This is the Z-Man SMH worms, and this is the SMH jig head. You know, if I'm fishing like brush piles or round cover or something like that, that's a really good jig head. If it's more like clean bottom, I'm generally just gonna use something like a ball head style shaky head. But shaky head, really good for clean bottom areas, maybe a little bit of brush, and it's a really good overall fish catcher in the month of July. All right, so we did talk about the fact that the month of July, you start seeing less and less fish offshore because of the pressure, but also because of the dissolved oxygen content in some of the lakes. Not all the lakes. Some lakes have, you know, plenty of open area to you know, have the wind, you know, help churn things up. And also some lakes just have a lot more current. You know, the Tennessee River is always going. So the current is always going to you know, kind of replenish the oxygen to a certain point. So in general, the month of July, I really do start to fish shallow again, which is actually a lot of fun. That's the way I like to fish. And so the month of July really does open that up for me again, you know. And one of my favorite things to do, especially on this lake is Poplar Tree Lake here north of Memphis. Really cool lake. And the instant I saw it, I knew it was going to be a good hollow body frog lake. So hollow body frog, the way that I'm fishing it in July is not like I would in early fall or late summer, you know, because a lot of lakes have matted out grass. The root systems start to decay because they've been matted out for so long, choking out all the sunlight. And, you know, early fall, that's a perfect time to throw a frog over grass mats. This time of year is not a great time to throw frogs over grass mats in general because they're still too thick top to bottom. But a hollow body frog is fantastic for skipping under overhanging trees like we have here. You know, this is some of the only shade that the fish have in this lake, and skipping a hollow body frog is a fantastic way to get to those fish because a hollow body frog is going to be completely weedless. You can skip it really well, and it just it really does imitate a whole wide variety of things that could fall in the water from these limbs. And there's just generally a lot of fish hanging around underneath these overhangs. So a hollow body frog is one of my favorite ways to catch them in the month of July, but you have to find the shade. It's really important to find the shade and get this thing back, you know, way back underneath stuff. The tackle that I use with the frog for this scenario, for under overhanging trees and things like that, is generally going to be a shorter rod, but still a heavy action. This is a 7.3 all-purpose series heavy action rod. And then I'm still going to use braid. 50-pound Seaguar Tactics is my favorite. You still want to go pretty heavy because you still got pretty hefty hooks, and you're also using a heavy action rod. So you don't want to use even 30-pound test. To me, is too light, and you'll start breaking off just because there's no stretch, there's nothing to absorb all that energy, and so use heavy line. But in general, just skip this around underneath overhangs and around shade pockets and shade lines. That's the deal. Another topwater bait that I love throwing in the month of July is a prop bait. Okay, a prop bait is a excellent bait in July because for the same reason, you know, if I'm on a lake that maybe the overhangs aren't like touching the water, they're not like super close to the bottom, but they're still creating some shade, I feel like a prop bait is going to catch more fish than the frog will in that scenario, where you're not necessarily like throwing it into into the way back in overhanging brush. You kind of have more space between where the branches are and where the surface of the water is. So you can actually cast this thing and you're not casting it, through things, because this is not a good bait to skip. And it's not a good bait to fish around a lot of heavy cover, but it is a really good one to like throw around the edges of like lay down timber, to throw in any little shade pockets, and also around bluegill beds. There's still bluegill beds in the month of July. In fact, I saw one earlier today on this lake. And so fishing around bluegill beds with a prop bait is really, really a good technique. All right. The final technique that I love using in the month of July is flipping and pitching. Okay, I love to flip and pitch this time of year, and one of my favorite baits for the month of July to flip is going to be just a straight tail worm or stick bait. This right here is the Bang Sticks from Z-Man. I'm going to be rigging it on a EWG, Hayabusa 959, and usually like a 1/4 ounce weight. Now, you don't necessarily have to fish a straight tail worm like this. You can fish your favorite flipping bait, whether it's a creature bait, beaver style bait. The palmetto bugs is one of my favorite, but because the bite is pretty tough, I just love the gliding action that a stick bait has. And I feel like not as many fish have seen a stick bait presented in this fashion this time of year. So I think that it's kind of like, beating some of the pressure that these fish have seen over the last several months. But flipping and pitching around any type of shade object, it could be docks, it could be a laydown, it could be overhanging trees with some laydowns mixed in. That's a really good scenario. Kind of the same type of situation that you would be throwing the frog for. Flipping and pitching can be really good, but for deeper water, like if the banks are a little bit steeper, the frog may not be the deal. You may need to get something down to those fish that are sitting a little bit deeper, and so flipping and pitching is a really good option. So it's not as important to just choose this type of worm. Again, you can use any type of flipping technique, but flipping and pitching, getting into those fish that have really tucked themselves into heavy cover, is really important this time of year. So anyways, I've droned on and on about fishing in July and the techniques that I like to throw. If you guys are interested in any of the products that I talked about today, check out the description below for those links. Otherwise, if you have any questions or comments, if you think I left out a technique that needs to be added to the July list, drop that in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. I'm going to see you out on the water. Trust the process.